A man named Gary worked 31 years as a maintenance worker on a corporate campus. Everybody on that property loved Gary. The kind of guy who remembered your kids' names, showed up early, stayed late, never complained. His financial planner ran the numbers a full year before he retired and told him directly, "You can leave today." Gary said he wanted to work a little longer, just in case. He finally retired. And 18 months later, Gary was dead. One trip to the Holy Land, one visit to his grandkids. 18 months of the 20+ years he should have had. The money was never the problem. Gary had enough. He never gave himself permission to believe it. Here is what the title of this video does not tell you. The 7 pieces of advice I am going to walk through today are not the investment advice, the tax advice, or the 401k optimization you have seen 100 times. Every single one of them is about the gap between having enough money and acting like you do. That gap, the psychological distance between the math and the behavior, is responsible for more wasted retirement years than every market crash since 1929 combined. And I can say that with confidence because I have watched it happen repeatedly in extremely well-funded portfolios. So no, this is not about picking the right mutual fund. This is about not being Gary. Here is what is actually broken. Retirement planning content, including mine, spends about 90% of its time on the financial architecture, the portfolio allocation, the safe withdrawal rate, the Roth conversion ladder. That all matters. I have multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars invested myself, and I think hard about every one of those decisions. But the retirees who actually enjoy retirement, the ones who look back with gratitude instead of regret, they did not get there because their Monte Carlo simulation said 94% success. They figured out 7 specific behavioral and psychological patterns that the financial industry almost never discusses because you cannot charge a basis point on them. Today, I'm covering all 7. I will tell you exactly what the research says, why the conventional version of each piece of advice is either incomplete or quietly wrong, and what to actually do about it. Some of this is going to challenge assumptions you've been operating on for decades. I want you to hold one image in your head for this entire video. You spend 40 years building a cage, not a prison, a fortress. You fill it with assets. You fortify the walls with contributions and compound interest. You watch the balance grow. And eventually, the door unlocks. You have done it. You are free. And then, most people do not leave. They stand inside the unlocked cage, staring at the open door, waiting for one more signal that it is safe, waiting for the balance to be higher, waiting for the market to calm down, waiting for a better moment that, statistically speaking, never comes. The cage is unlocked. That is the problem I am solving today. Not building the cage, you are probably doing that just fine. Walking out of it, I am going to come back to this image throughout the video. Every time you hear it, it is pointing at a different reason people stay stuck, even when freedom is mathematically available. In a few minutes, I'm going to show you why the single most watched TED Talk on human happiness has something devastating to say about what the retirement advice industry is solving for. But first, here is why the most common retirement planning mistake is not actually a planning mistake at all. Piece of advice number 1 from retirees, almost universally: stop chasing just-in-case money. Here's what that really means. There is a psychological phenomenon documented in behavioral economics called the reference point problem, first described rigorously by Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky in 1979. The idea is that humans do not evaluate outcomes in absolute terms. We evaluate them relative to a shifting reference point. And the reference point shifts, always upward, always harder to reach, which means the moment you hit your retirement savings target, your brain does not say enough. It says, what if that is not actually enough? And the goalpost moves. This is what just-in-case money is. It is not a number. It is an emotional state wearing a number's clothes. I know a man, I will call him Dennis, electrical engineer, utility company, 37 years, the most organized human being I have ever spoken with. Built a custom spreadsheet to track his monthly portfolio drift against projected withdrawal scenarios, which is impressive, and also tells you that Dennis had fully merged his identity with his financial optimization. By 63, he had $1.4 million in his 401k, a pension covering 60% of his pre-retirement income, and a social security benefit sitting untouched. 3 independent calculations agreed. Dennis could retire. Dennis said he wanted to wait until he hit 1.6 million, just in case. 1.6 came. The goalposts moved to 1.8. Then the market had a good run, and suddenly 2 million feels cleaner. Dennis retired at 68. His wife had been waiting since 63 to take the RV trip through the Pacific Northwest they had talked about since their honeymoon. She was diagnosed with early-stage Parkinson's at 67. They have not taken the trip. The problem is not the number. The fear lives in the brain, not the account. No dollar amount cures a brain problem. Here is the fix. And I want to be specific, because vague advice is worthless advice. You need 3 numbers. I call this the 3-number framework. First, your income gap. Total monthly expenses minus guaranteed monthly income. Social Security, pension, rental income, anything that does not require you to choose to work, that gap is what your portfolio needs to fill. Second, your freedom number. The portfolio balance that covers the income gap at a sustainable withdrawal rate. The research, including the original Trinity study and its subsequent updates, puts the sustainable range between 3.5% and 4.5% annually, depending on your asset allocation and time horizon. On an income gap of $48,000 per year, that means a freedom number somewhere between $1,070,000 and $1,370,000. Real number, not a feeling. Third, your tax drag, because a pre-tax 401k balance of $1.3 million is not $1.3 million. If you are withdrawing in a 22% effective federal bracket, that is closer to $1,014,000 in actual purchasing power. Same account, very different number. The gap matters enormously. When you have those 3 figures, the just-in-case spiral has nowhere to go. You've replaced a moving emotional target with a fixed mathematical one. The cage is unlocked, and now you know it with precision. Piece of advice number 2, do not wait for a health scare to take action. Most people think the health risk in retirement is the cost of healthcare. Fidelity's 2025 estimate put the total healthcare costs for a 65-year-old couple in retirement at approximately $315,000. That is real, and it belongs in your plan, but that is not what I'm pointing at right now. You think the health risk in retirement is financial. The actual health risk is sequential. There is a well-documented concept in retirement spending research called the retirement smile, the trajectory of spending across retirement years. In the early phase, roughly 60 to 70, retirees spend the most. They're healthy, mobile, curious. Researchers call these the go-go years. From 70 to 78 or so, spending declines the slow-go years. After 78, it often drops significantly, the no-go years. Not because people run out of money, because the body stops cooperating with the plan. David Blanchett's research at Morningstar, analyzing actual spending data from thousands of retirees, found that inflation-adjusted spending declined roughly 1% per year on average throughout retirement. That is a compounding phenomenon. If you plan on $80,000 per year at 65, by 78, you may only be spending $65,000 in real terms, not because you chose that, but because biology chose it for you. Every year you defer retirement past the point when the math allows it, you are trading peak capacity years for additional contributions to a portfolio that, in most cases, does not need them. You are buying insurance on an already insured house, while the house ages 5 more years of contributions might add $150,000. 5 fewer years in the go-go window, when your body can still do what you have been deferring. That is an asymmetric trade. Most people never notice they are making it. The cage is unlocked, but the windows are getting smaller every year you stay inside. Honey, I have decided to retire at 72. We talked about 65 7 years ago. I know, but the market had that rough patch in. You said that in 2019. I wanted to be sure. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because everything I have described so far is money psychology. But the third piece of advice from retirees breaks the frame entirely, and it is backed by the most robust long-term research into human happiness that has ever been conducted. If you are not familiar with this data, it is going to reframe what you think retirement is actually for. By the way, hit subscribe if you like the content. Otherwise, YouTube's algorithm may never show you my videos again. Piece of advice number 3. Do not let relationships fade. The Harvard study on adult development started in 1938, still running. It followed 724 men across their entire adult lives. 2 cohorts, one from Harvard University, one from Boston's inner-city working-class neighborhoods, tracking their health, their finances, their relationships, and their happiness for over 80 years. The longest continuously running study of adult life in scientific history. What did it find? Not net worth, not career success, not cholesterol. The single strongest predictor of health and happiness in late life was the quality of close, personal relationships. People who had warm, connected relationships at 50 were healthier at 80 than people who had been preoccupied with wealth and status at 50. The director of the study, Robert Waldinger, gave a TED Talk on these findings that has been viewed over 43 million times. The conclusion is not ambiguous. Close relationships protect the brain, extend lifespan, and are more predictive of late life well-being than almost any other measurable variable. And here's what retirement does to your relationship infrastructure. Think about where your social network comes from by the time you are 55 or 60. Work, mostly work. The colleagues, the lunch group, the Tuesday standing meetings. You did not necessarily choose these people, but they are the texture of your daily social life. The people you talk to, the people you complain to about the commute, they are part of how you define yourself. The day you retire, that entire structure disappears overnight, not gradually, overnight. Men are disproportionately vulnerable here. Research from the AARP Public Policy Institute has consistently found that men over 45 are significantly more likely to report loneliness than women of the same age. Men tend to anchor their social lives to their professional roles. Women, on average, maintain broader and more diverse friendship networks. When the professional role disappears, men often find themselves with only their spouse carrying the full weight of their social needs. And that is an unfair and unsustainable arrangement. This is not soft advice. This is mortality data. Chronic loneliness has been associated with a 26% increase in risk of premature death, according to research published in the journal Perspectives on Psychological Science. Julian Holt-Lunstedt's meta-analysis, reviewing data from over 3 million people, found that social isolation carries health risks roughly comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes per day. Nobody puts reduce loneliness on their retirement checklist. They are running sequence of return scenarios instead. You think the biggest risk in retirement is running out of money? The actual biggest risk is running out of meaningful human connection. Those are very different problems with very different solutions. Here's the action framework. Make 2 lists of 5 people each. List 1. 5 people you would be genuinely devastated to lose contact with as you move through this phase. List 2. 5 people you feel like you've already drifted from and want to reconnect with. That is the map. Then, not someday, actually this week, reach out to one person from either list. 1 phone call, 1 text suggesting coffee or a walk. The research on social habits is unambiguous. Intentional reconnection creates reciprocal loops. You reach out, the relationship reactivates, it compounds forward, exactly like a portfolio. Except nobody taught you to manage this one. The cage is unlocked. But who is walking out with you? Here is someone I want you to think about for the rest of this video. Call him Ray, 63 years old, recently retired. $2.1 million across his 401k, a brokerage account, and a rental property generating $1,800 per month. Ray worked with a fee-only fiduciary for 15 years. He Roth converted aggressively during his lower income earning years. His withdrawal rate at retirement was 3.2%. By every financial metric I know how to apply, Ray is in excellent shape. 6 months into retirement, Ray called me. He said, I check my portfolio 3 times a day. I am more anxious than I was when I was working. I feel useless. $2.1 million. 3.2% withdrawal rate. Feels useless. I am going to come back to Ray before this video ends, because his problem is not a portfolio problem. And what resolved it is the most practically useful thing in everything we are covering today. Before the next escalation, let me give you a case study that pulls together everything we have covered so far, because I want you to see the numbers in a real-world scenario. Call him Martin, 52 years old, senior operations director at a logistics company, earns $140,000 per year. He has been contributing 15% of his salary to his 401k since he was 31, at a 7% average annual return with consistent contributions. Martin hits a freedom number of approximately $1.8 million, based on a target retirement income of $72,000 annually at a 4% withdrawal rate somewhere around age 62. The math is clean, but here is what Martin has not modeled. He has been counting on his work friendships as essentially his entire social life for 15 years. He lives in a suburb where most of his neighbors are also in peak career mode. His wife has her own career and her own friendship network. His 2 children are in different states. Outside of work, Martin has no structured identity, no hobby community, no volunteer role, no consistent friendship outside of professional relationships. If Martin retires at 62 financially optimal, he is walking out of the cage with no map for what comes next. The research is not vague about what happens in that scenario. Within 18 months, men in Martin's exact situation show meaningfully elevated rates of depression, increased alcohol consumption, and counterintuitively reduced physical activity. The cage door opens. Martin walks out, and his brain, which has been anchored to productivity and professional identity for 3 decades, interprets the open space as danger rather than freedom. Now, what if Martin spent the next 10 years not just building the portfolio, which he is already handling correctly, but also building the social and psychological architecture in parallel? A hobby community with real ongoing relationships, a volunteer role that provides structure 2 days per week, 3 deep friendships outside of work that he maintains with intention, 2 or 3 concrete travel goals with actual deposits on the calendar. Same money, completely different retirement. The delta is not in the asset allocation. It is in what Martin does with the unlocked cage. But here is what nobody is telling you about that transition, and stay with me for the next few minutes, because this is where the whole video comes together. Piece of advice number 4. Intentionally design your life after work. Not plan your finances, design your life. There is a difference, and it is not a small one. A 2018 Merrill Lynch and AgeWave survey found that 81% of retirees said they wished they had spent more time planning the non-financial aspects of retirement before leaving work. 81%. And in the same survey, nearly every single respondent said they had spent significant time on their investment allocation. That asymmetry is staggering. People spend more time planning their kitchen renovation than they spend planning who they are going to be for the next 25 to 30 years of their life. Here is the psychology. You have spent 4 decades as a defined role. You are the engineer, the director, the manager, the contractor, the business owner. That role gave you structure, a reason to get up, a clear sense of purpose, a way to answer what do you do at a party. When you retire, the role disappears overnight, the money stays. The identity goes with the badge. Without intentional redesign, retirement becomes what I would call free-floating anxiety with a very good balance sheet. You know the money is there. You just do not know who you are without the title. So the brain, which genuinely abhors an identity vacuum, creates a new scoreboard. You check the portfolio 3 times a day because the portfolio is the only number left telling you how you are doing. That is Ray. Exactly Ray. There is a parable that I think captures this precisely. A fishing boat captain spends 30 years navigating the same stretch of coastline. He knows every rock, every current, every weather pattern. He is extraordinarily good at what he does. He retires. 3 months in, his family notices he keeps driving to the harbor. He does not take the boat out. He does not talk to the other captains. He just stands on the dock and looks at the water. Not because he misses the work, because the dock is the last place he felt like himself. Identity does not retire when you do. You have to actively build the next version of it, or it leaves a void the brain will fill with anxiety. The practical tool here. The perfect Tuesday exercise. Design it in specific detail. You are retired. Tuesday, 6:45 in the morning. What do? Walk through the whole day. Breakfast, morning activity, who you meet, where you go at 10, lunch, where and with whom, afternoon, dinner, evening. Write it out. Then, and this is the part people skip, block a day within the next 30 days and actually live it, not as a thought experiment, as a test run. What you will discover is that your imagined retirement Tuesday and your executed retirement Tuesday have significant gaps. Those gaps are the work. Finding them now, before you retire, is vastly more useful than finding them 6 months in with a $2.1 million balance and nowhere constructive to direct the anxiety. Piece of advice number 5, stop replaying old regrets. I want to handle this carefully because this is the one that sounds like it belongs in a self-help book, and I almost removed it. Then I looked at the neuroscience and changed my mind. Rumination, the repetitive mental replay of past negative events, activates the default mode network of the brain. That is the neural circuitry that idles when you are not focused on an external task. The brain, left without a defined role or structured activity, reaches for unresolved problems. The bigger the life transition, and retirement is one of the biggest, the more the default mode network runs hot. Yale psychologist Susan Nolan-Hoeksema, who spent decades studying rumination, found that chronic ruminators are significantly more likely to develop depression following major life transitions. And retirement is the ideal environment for chronic rumination. The external role is gone, the structure is gone, and the default mode network runs more freely than at any other point in adult life. The tool that works, and this is backed by 30 years of cognitive behavioral therapy research, is the regret reset ritual. Every time a specific regret surfaces, you write one sentence. What did that experience teach me? Not a journal, not a therapy session, one sentence in your phone. You are creating an output for the loop. The brain generates the regret, you generate the lesson, the loop has an exit. Over repeated practice, the default pathway weakens. This is literally cognitive restructuring, applied as a daily micro habit. It is simple, it is not easy, it works. The second tool, a forward move rule. When the regret surfaces, before you can spiral, you immediately do something constructive. Call someone, go outside, work on a project. You're pairing the regret trigger with a productive action. Repeated enough times, the pairing interrupts the original loop. The brain learns a new route. The cage is unlocked, but regret will keep you standing inside it even after the door swings open. A 68-year-old man staring at his phone. His wife asks what he is doing. He says, running the numbers on what I would have if I had bought Amazon in 2001. She says, what did you find? He says, I need a minute. In a few minutes, I am going to close with 3 specific takeaways calibrated exactly to this video. Not generic diversification advice, not motivational poster material, but let me finish with the final 2 pieces, because this is where the whole argument lands. Piece of advice number 6, stop putting off experiences. This sounds like treat yourself advice. It is not. It is financial planning advice in philosophical clothing. Here is the data. The retirement smile curve I referenced earlier, the finding that inflation-adjusted spending declines roughly 1% per year throughout retirement, has a specific and underappreciated implication. If you're 62 and planning to take that trip to Japan in a few years, you are planning to take it with a 67-year-old body instead of a 62-year-old body. Then perhaps a 72-year-old body. The experience is not the same. The body is not the same. The capacity for physical exploration, long walks through ancient streets, overnight trains, 10-hour days of spontaneous discovery, it declines on a biological schedule that is faster than most people's planning timeline. A retired school principal I know, I will call her Carol, said something I keep returning to. She said, all the physically demanding trips I kept deferring when I was 63 and completely healthy. I genuinely could not have taken them at 72, even if I had wanted to. Not because of money. My knees, my energy, my stamina, everything was different. I'd saved the money for experiences I never got to have. The loss framing here is precise. Every year you defer a physically demanding or adventurous experience. It is compound interest running in reverse, except instead of money compounding downward, it is your body's capacity to use money compounding downward. The dollars do not decay. The ability to enjoy spending them does. This is one of the most counterintuitive financial realities in retirement planning, and almost nobody models it. The action item. Write down 10 experiences you have been deferring. Not bucket list fantasies. Real, feasible ones within the next 2 years. Pick the easiest one to execute and put a deposit down. Not maybe. An actual financial commitment. Behavioral economics has a name for this. A commitment device. The financial commitment dramatically increases follow-through by making the cost of not going real rather than theoretical. Your brain responds to some costs. Use that tendency against its natural inclination toward indefinite deferral. The cage is unlocked. The car is fueled. Stop sitting in the driveway with the engine off. And the 7th piece of advice, find a retirement guide now. Here is where I push back on the standard version of this, because the conventional framing is right for the wrong reasons. The standard version says, find a fee-only fiduciary financial planner who specializes in retirement income distribution, not just accumulation. That is a different skill set, and the distinction matters. Get a comprehensive written plan covering investment strategy, income sequencing, tax optimization, healthcare, and legacy planning. And yes, that is correct. The research on outcomes for people with comprehensive written financial plans versus those without is not ambiguous. A written plan with a qualified specialist meaningfully improves retirement outcomes across almost every measurable dimension. But most financial plans address exactly 0% of the psychological and behavioral factors that determine whether you actually enjoy retirement. Not because financial planners are negligent, because a financial plan is not a life plan. They are 2 different documents solving 2 different problems, and most people only hire someone to build one of them. You can have the most sophisticated withdrawal sequence optimization ever constructed, and if you retire without a social architecture, without a redesigned identity, without having addressed the rumination loops running in the background, you are going to be Ray. Sitting on $2.1 million, checking the portfolio 3 times a day, wondering why you feel worse than you did when you were working? The real retirement guide is not a single person. It is a 2-part framework. Financial architecture, the numbers, the tax strategy, the withdrawal sequence on one side. Psychological and social architecture, the identity, the relationships, the experience design, the behavioral habits on the other. Most people have a professional team working on the financial side, and literally no one working on the other side. The 7 pieces of advice in this video are the other side. And the industry will not sell it to you because there is no fee structure around it. Ray. What happened to Ray? 18 months after that first call, Ray had done something he had initially dismissed as too simple to move the needle. He made 2 lists, the 5 people he would be devastated to lose, the 5 he had already drifted from, and started making 1 call per week. He connected with a volunteer mentorship program at a local high school, teaching basic engineering concepts to juniors. He organized a monthly hiking group with 3 former colleagues. He booked a 2-week trip through northern Japan with his wife deposit down, calendar blocked, committed for 12 months out. When I spoke to Ray the second time, he said he was busier than when he was working. But the quality of the busyness was entirely different. Every item on the schedule was there because he chose it. He was not reacting to someone else's urgency. He was, in his words, running the exact life I want, not the one that used to run me. Ray unlocked the cage. And then he built something worth walking toward. Let's come back to Gary. 31 years of showing up. 18 months of finally living. 1 trip. The money worked. The permission never came. If there's a through line across everything in this video, it is this. Retirement is not a financial event. It is a psychological transition that happens to involve a substantial amount of money. And the industry that manages your money is almost entirely structured to solve the financial side while leaving the psychological side completely unaddressed, not out of malice, but because that is what you hired them to do. 3 specific takeaways. Not generic, calibrated exactly to this. First, run the 3-number framework this week. Income gap, freedom number, tax drag. If you cannot calculate these 3 figures, that is the actual problem to solve before any conversation about asset allocation. You cannot make rational decisions about when to retire or how much is enough without a fixed mathematical target. The just-in-case trap has no exit without these numbers. Every year you operate without them, you're essentially deciding how fast to drive without knowing where you are going. Second, make your 2 social lists and send 1 message this week. The Harvard data on relationships and longevity is 80+ years of rigorous longitudinal science. It is not soft. If your social infrastructure is currently 70% work-dependent, you have a structural vulnerability that is as important to address as your sequence of returns risk, and arguably more important because you can model sequence of returns risk, but you cannot model what happens to your brain and body after 2 years of isolation. The research already told you. The answer is not good. Third, pick 1 deferred experience, commit real money to it, and put a specific date on a calendar. Not someday, a date with a deposit attached. The go-go years are finite and front-loaded. Every year you defer an experience requiring physical capacity is a compounding cost paid in biology, not dollars. Your financial planner is almost certainly not modeling this for you. It does not fit in their software. You have to model it yourself. The retirement industry will sell you a plan for your money every day of the week. Nobody is selling you a plan for the rest of it. That is the gap. That is what Gary never had. That is what cost him 20 years he paid for and never got to spend. Lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes. And a life you actually designed will outlast any withdrawal strategy ever optimized, but only if you walk out of the cage.